Beyond the Fence Line, a podcast brought to you by the Texas Agricultural Land Trust. Created by landowners for landowners, we're proud to play a role in conserving the Texas legacy of wide open spaces.
Well, thanks for joining us here at Beyond the Fence Line, where we talk about, what happens on our ranches and what happens on our ranches and what it means beyond that fence line. Today, we're going to kind of shift our topic around policy. We have with us today Dr. Bart Fischer, who currently serves as the co-director of the Agricultural and Food Policy Center at Texas A&M. His applied research focuses on solving real-world policy problems for agricultural producers and also anticipating potential policy changes for Congress to consider. Before Bart joined the university, he served more than 8 years at the Committee on Agriculture on the U.S. House of Representatives, most recently as the Deputy Staff Director and Chief Economist under Congressman Mike Conaway out of Midland. He also, helped kind of draft the last two farm bills. I think one of the things that Bart brings to the policy world is he's a fifth generation raised on his family wheat, cotton, cattle operation in southwest Oklahoma outside Frederick. And he continues to be actively involved. I think one of the key things about Bart is he's definitely grounded by a tremendously great wife and Carolyn and his three kids. And thank goodness his kids take after his wife. And Bart, appreciate you being here with us today.
You bet, Chad. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Well, let's kind of dive in and let's start with kind of an overview, Bart, around the Agricultural Food Policy Center, its history and its purpose.
Sure, you bet. So our center, the Ag and Food Policy Center here at Texas A&M, really was founded back in 1983. Really came together, as a project of A&M, but also working jointly with the Texas Congressional Delegation, and specifically the House and Senate Ag Committees. And really, bottom line, our bread and butter is looking at farm level policy analysis. So when you go around the world, that's what we're known for, and what AFPC is really renowned for is looking at the impact that policy has at the farm level. And as you noted in the introduction there, Chad, for me personally, being a farm kid, growing up on a farm, I'd probably be sitting on a tractor myself if it weren't for being very passionate about the impact that the decisions really in Washington and also in Austin, the impact that those decisions have on individual producers. And so, AFPC, that's what we're known for. And when I got an opportunity to come back here, and particularly to work alongside Dr. Joe Outlaw, my co-director, I really jumped at the opportunity. Really, the primary way we go about the work that we do is through what we call representative farms. So we work with panels of 4 to 6 producers really around the country. So this is not just in Texas. We're really in about 36 states or 30 states and about 100 different farms around the country. And so in each of those locations, we work with 4 to 6 above average producers, and we work to put together what's called a representative farm. And so all those producers come together and it's all on paper. So we're creating financial statements, collecting all the inputs that would go into a farm, everything from yield to fertilizer use and costs, equipment complements, land tenure, whether it's owned, rented, and put together a farm on paper. And we bring that back here to campus in College Station. And when Congress reaches out, we're able then to simulate the effect that a policy change would have on the bottom line for farms around the country. And so if it's anything from tweaking a reference price in ARC and PLC, or if it's looking at making a tweak to CRP, whatever that is, we can run those changes through our farm models here on campus and get an idea of the impact that it'll have on farms. And again, it's all over the country. And so that's really our bread and butter here is farm level policy analysis. As you know too, though, because we do work directly for the House and Senate Ag Committees, we're often called on to address a number of issues beyond running kind of specific analysis in the context of the Farm Bill. And so on any given day, we're working on any number of projects at the request of the committees.
So Bart, you come to the center by the way of DC, where you served as the chief economist for the House Ag Committee. Can you describe, in kind of a little bit further detail to our audience, what your responsibilities were and what kind of projects you worked on while you were in DC?
Sure. So I was actually down at Texas A&M doing my PhD here in the Ag and Food Policy Center when I got a call from Washington about putting my name forward. I kind of chuckled at the time, but Congressman Frank Lucas from Western Oklahoma, the 3rd District there in Western Oklahoma, was the incoming chairman. And I started to get some calls asking if I might be interested in coming back to DC. I had worked there prior in another job as well. And so I was here at A&M, working on graduate school, planning on, staying focused and finishing up when I got that call. And, Mr. Lucas being from, we had some commonality there, he being from Western Oklahoma, me growing up on a farm in Western Oklahoma as well. But then also here at AFPC, knowing our center works for Congress, it kind of all just, the stars aligned, and he ultimately asked if I would come back to DC. And so I joined the committee as the chief economist in June of 2011, just in time for the Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction that was firing up that summer, which was really the precursor to the 2014 Farm Bill. And so, not to dredge up a lot of very fun memories from that long and drawn out process, but we spent 3 years almost every day working on that Farm Bill, going through failed votes on the House floor. And it was fortunate work for Mr. Lucas, who was the right guy for the job at the time, incredibly patient, kept his head down, kept plowing ahead. And so I was able to serve alongside of him throughout that bill. And, as chief economist, you kind of wear multiple hats. One of those is making sure that everything adds up. We're talking about almost $1 trillion in spending over 10 years that's authorized by a farm bill, with almost 80% of that being in the SNAP program or food stamps. But on the farm policy side, there's a lot of moving parts. And so a lot of my job was spent making sure that everything did add up. But the other big component, though, was on the design of farm policy, making sure that what we did worked for producers out in the countryside. And without belaboring the point, one example being that much of Texas and Oklahoma as well had been in a prolonged drought, and it just so happened that the livestock disaster programs, primarily the livestock forage program that helps provide drought assistance, had been turned off a year early under the 2008 Farm Bill. And so we went into the 2014 Farm Bill with no funding for that program. And we came out the other end with it being not only fully funded going forward, but also being funded retroactively to cover the drought. And so just one little example of what I was able to work on in the 2014 Farm Bill. Then in January of 2015, you have Mr. Conaway from Midland, Texas's 11th congressional district, who came in as the chairman. I was very fortunate to be able to stay on with him also in that same capacity as chief economist, but also had the good fortune of taking over the trade policy portfolio on the committee as well, and serving as his trade advisor throughout my time with him, which was almost four and a half years. So was on hand for all the NAFTA renegotiations, so on and so forth. And then, as you mentioned in the introduction, the last 2.5 years, I also served as his deputy staff director throughout the development of the 2018 Farm Bill, which meant I was doing the same things I was doing during the 14 Farm Bill as well, but also was making sure that the entire Farm Bill came together. All parts, all 12 titles were coming together in that package that ultimately was signed by President Trump on December 20th, 2018. So had a breadth of experience, was able to work on pretty much everything relating to ag policy over most of the last decade in Washington. I wouldn't trade the experience, and was just incredibly fortunate to work for really two outstanding legislators in Chairman Lucas and Chairman Conaway. but also excited to be back in Texas and now working full time on staff here, helping lead the effort here in College Station.
Yeah, I mean, what great experience, Bart. I mean, too, I think you stated it well, and envious in a sense of Chairman Lucas and Chairman Conaway are just two great individuals, and just that's pretty amazing to be able to work under their leadership and make the impact that you have, not for yourself, but for all the producers across the country. When you kind of think about that experience you gained there on the House Ag Committee, how does it really help you in your current position at AFP?
Sure, no, great question. In a lot of respects, I think it's similar to how it was when I went to DC. Growing up on a farm, was able to draw on that experience, knowing that, when we would be making decisions or when the members would be looking at making decisions, having grown up on a farm, I was fifth generation on our operation, both sets of grandparents farm, my folks farm full time. And so, that backdrop helped immensely in Washington because, not only did I have practical personal experience with it, but I also had a lot of people I could call on. And so I was very fortunate, to have had that background going into that job in DC. And in a lot of ways, the same thing, it applies down here as well. Our center, AFPC as I mentioned earlier, works directly for the House and Senate Ag Committees. And, and we have I'm the only one on staff here who's worked directly for the committees, and I'm fortunate to have an incredible staff. But there's also, I think I'm personally, fortunate to have seen what it's like on the inside. If you're going to be helping Congress, to some degree, it does help, to know, to have been on the inside of the sausage making, see how the sausage is made. And so I think that's probably the biggest benefit. The other is that, having worked in DC for years, it's about the policy, certainly, but a lot of what happens in Washington related to agriculture is about the people too. You can imagine with a PhD in ag econ, I'm a bit of a book nerd, but I learned very quickly in Washington, if you want to get anything done, it's not about who kind of in that the crude sense of, it's much more about if you want to get things done, it's about having relationships and knowing who you can call on, and so on and so forth. And so I think one is just that being able to bring that experience down here, but then two, knowing a lot of the folks in DC who are there, who are champions for agriculture, and being able to call on them too, I think is also another added benefit from having worked there.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think we overlook, we all get passionate and we get kind of tunnel vision in a way, even, sitting, behind the tractor and things of that nature.
Sure.
We're truly in the relationship business, no matter behind the tractor or behind a desk in DC. We're all interconnected. And I think that's key. When we think about this interconnection, I think, really, Bart, kind of start thinking about this last, 6, 7, 8 months of this pandemic. It's appended just about everyone's lives and livelihoods. What has been the role of the Policy Center during this pandemic?
Sure. I think it's taken on a couple of forms, much like the rest of A&M in general, and certainly AgriLife in particular. The university at large, again, all the way down to our center, has tried to be very proactive in being a resource for folks across Texas. And I think that it's a perfect illustration of why the extension model at universities is so important. And making sure that we're reaching out to folks who are directly affected. And so a lot of what we've done is just general education, trying to put out materials, keeping folks in the state informed of what's going on in Washington and the resources that are available. So certainly that's been one aspect. The other, though, is is very much about the policy development process. So, Congress has acted now, in a fulsome way 3 different times. They're still working on phase 4 response to COVID, which, looks like it may slip until after the election. But our center, I probably fielded daily phone calls from Washington, D.C. over the last, or at least multiple times a week over the last several months, as Congress has really, in rapid fashion, had to kind of grapple with how to respond. And so, whether it was Congress putting together, the CARES Act with kind of the initial response for agriculture, where they provided funding to USDA, or whether it was USDA responding in kind to that and crafting the initial, CFAP program, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, and now the new CFAP 2.0 that they announced just last week. Our center is in a bit of a unique position in that we're called on regularly for advice, and was certainly able to kind of convey the concerns of Texas and what was going on in Texas, and convey those back to Washington.
Yeah, it's a lot going on, and a lot to kind of absorb from a producer's perspective, because it just changes so quick, and it's one of the key things I think for the policy center is you guys are kind of forefront, and I think the whole team's experience and your experience definitely helps bring forth that producer insight and helping with this policy. In your former role, kind of think about probably some of the major policy from a producer perspective. In your former role, you really helped craft the last 2 farm bills. This next farm bill is just right around the corner. What's the policy center's role going to be in this next farm bill?
Oh man, that's a good question. To some degree, our center, we have to be nimble because we never know what's coming, right? Where Congress is grappling with kind of the news of the day and what's going on, and we can get any number of questions. So to some degree, it's still unknown, still up in the air. But if past is prologue, one of the primary things we're going to be called on, for is particularly on the farm policy side. That's where again our bread and butter is on. Is on farm policy. So I have no doubt that we're going to be asked a lot of questions there. So a lot of what we do is confidential. It's behind the scenes. And so if Congress is looking at either tweaking existing, programs or completely crafting new ones, we'll either model out those specific tweaks, or we'll model out the complete new policy change and simulate the impact that it would have on farmers' financials. So a lot of that back and forth, though, is just confidential analysis that we'll do for both House and Senate Ag committees, and we're nonpartisan, so it's both majority and minority will do that work for. Some of it may ultimately become more formalized. So, when I was in D.C. back during the 2014 Farm Bill, the center put out a more formal analysis of the package that it had been introduced, primarily because Congress wanted to use that in discussions with, or the Ag committees wanted to use it in discussions with other members on Capitol Hill. And so, in a lot of ways, we're a tool that the Hill can use at their discretion and at their disposal, and we just have to be nimble and respond to it. But certainly, farm policy will be a big part of that. Beyond again, the analytical, we have, and it's not just me here, we have an extraordinary team of professionals at the center that cover really virtually every policy topic under the sun, certainly as it relates to agriculture. And so beyond the more formalized analysis, we'll field a lot of questions, and increasingly we're fielding questions from a lot of offices to individual member offices, both within Texas and outside of Texas as well. And so increasingly we're just getting more and more, even background policy questions from offices and helping them think through, issues that they're trying to address. And so I think the script hasn't been written yet on the role we'll play, but there's no question, that we'll be right there, helping the House and Senate Ag committees as they do craft the next bill.
Yeah, thanks for that insight, Bart. Here at Texas Agricultural Land Trust, we're focused on policy priorities right now that benefit agricultural landowners in Texas. Right now we're focused on these resilient landscapes, and looking at really kind of what this podcast is around, about, right, beyond the fence line. It's about this private land stewardship, public benefits, and producers being solutions to some of these environmental issues that we have. Any insights that you could share, with us kind of on this this idea of these resilient landscapes, and just producers being able to maybe share their stories a little bit more broadly, and any thoughts?
Sure. You and I could probably talk all day about this particular topic. I mean, I think for me in general, and if you kind of lump everything, I know that the word sustainability is kind of overused, but
Right.
And part of it's just this kind of flows naturally from the work we do here. But I've long, my view has long been that if farms are going to be sustainable and contribute and continue, all the soil and water conserving benefits that they do provide, they've ultimately got to be economically sustainable. And so that's why I often focus, more kind of on farm safety net and risk management. But one thing we increasingly, that side of the ledger in a farm bill is increasingly, under scrutiny over the last 2 decades. Whereas the other side of the ledger is that we've made extraordinary strides and benefits, in the conservation titles. And when I hear particularly in Washington D.C., a lot of comments about production agriculture and this, that, and the other, it's almost as if folks don't even realize the tremendous investment that's been made over the last 2 decades in conservation. And even if you look at the 2018 Farm Bill, that was I would argue Title II, the conservation title in that bill was an enormous success story. And if you look at EQIP as a perfect example, for the first time ever, we were able to push funding up above $2 billion. So ramping up almost to a $250 million per year increase. At a time where we were writing a base, a budget neutral bill, we were able to make some pretty extraordinary investments into EQIP. And if you look at small watershed rehab and the watershed and flood prevention stuff that's in the Farm Bill too, we're able to get permanent funding there for the first time ever, permanent mandatory funding there for the first time ever. And so really across the board, I think there's increasingly this recognition of what we've always long said, that farmers are first and best stewards. But as you mentioned, there's still a lot of work to be done. And even on the 2 topics you listed, it's nice to see you picked really easy ones to work on, Chad. No, two extraordinarily important ones. I mean, if you think of TALP as an example of all the work that y'all have done in conserving working lands, and undeveloped working lands over the years, I think it's kind of only natural that water follows suit. And while we have made investments on that front in successive farm bills, there's no question that I think more focus could be brought to bear there, more resources could be brought to bear there. And so the fact that you all you are looking at water conservation in particular, I think is a big issue. And on the resiliency on the resiliency front, I think the big question is, and again, it's often wrapped up in this, the climate change conservation, which comes with its own interesting set of politics. But the reality is Congress has shown a willingness, rather than taking the regulatory approach, Congress is taking kind of the voluntary approach. And I would argue that it does work there. The big question is, kind of what roles the ag community going to play going forward on that front. And whether it is working lands conservation, which is the hallmark of our conservation policy today, and certainly the EQIP improvements and the improvements we made to the conservation stewardship program, all of those are with the mind that working lands conservation is the most appropriate way to go about conserving resources. But then if you're looking at resiliency or stewardship practices, again, that featured front and center in CSP, and all of that against the backdrop of providing incentives to producers So I think, the stage is somewhat, been set coming out of the 2018 Farm Bill. And the big question is, as we go into the 2023 or 2022 or 2024, whatever Farm Bill it ends up being, I think the big question is what are all those going to look like into the future? And so, I mean, I commend you guys for working on those two topics, even if no question they're hard to get your arms around, but it's important we get our arms around them too. And so I think, if that's the focus of TALT going forward, or a couple of your topic areas you're looking at, I think it's time well spent.
Yeah, I mean, I think spot on, Bart. I think 2018 Farm Bill was, some tremendous wins. I'm looking forward to, kind of building upon those successes in this next Farm Bill. I think too, when we look at, kind of the dynamics and the horizon, right, of conservation, where, people are wanting to be more tied to it. You have, I think, more private type funding available too, which I think helps us from producers, right, where we can start stacking these opportunities together from the next Farm Bill, whatever year that may be, to also connecting, what happens on the ground back to the consumer through these corporations that, as you said, are looking at it and finding ways to, help fund in that kind of free market approaches. So I'm excited and very optimistic of where we're heading in the future. So I'm looking forward to that. When we kind of look at the horizon of those opportunities, what's on the horizon for the Policy Center? What are you currently working on that makes a big difference?
Sure. So one of the first, we've been working on, with DC, as I mentioned, on the COVID response. Just this past week, USDA put out their CFAP 2.0 details, and so we're going to be going through that closely. We had when CFAP 1.0 came out, there were several issues we had flagged, both internally and then certainly after it came out. And it looks like some of those were addressed this time around, but we're right now. I was in DC all of last week and came out late last week, so we're still getting our arms around and analyzing CFAP 2.0. There, with following COVID and all the disruptions, in supply chains, there's been a lot of questions out of Washington as well. We typically we spend a lot of time focused on the row crop side, but increasingly we're fielding calls about specialty crops and also livestock. And so one of the big things that we're looking at and likely going to be working on over the next year at a nationwide effort is on cattle markets, cattle supply chain, all of those issues that come with it that were kind of brought to light during the kind of peak of COVID, where we've been asked to look into that as well. So that's another big issue we're tackling. And beyond that, a lot of what we do is really also just providing baseline outlooks for Congress. And so for all of those representative farms I mentioned, the nearly 100 across 30 or so states, we have to keep those updated. So we visit those farms. Our staff visits those panels of producers. We try to visit at least every 2 years so that we always have the absolute latest information that we can provide to Washington. And so not only does it provide the basis for us to be able to do policy analysis, but it also enables us to be able to communicate very clearly to Congress exactly where the state of the farm economy is, really not in some aggregate, big, $100 billion number, but really down at the ground level. What does it look like, for producers at the ground level? And so we're particularly with COVID being grounded due to COVID, we're working through how to kind of catch back up on that front as well. And most of that is so that that we'll be absolutely prepared and ready to go once conversations do start to heat up on the next Farm Bill.
Yeah, those are some exciting topics. I mean, especially, my passion kind of on the beef cattle side and the grazing side of it. Glad to hear you guys kind of tackling some of that. And I know, kind of ties into our last podcast that we had, Bob McCann, producer there in South Texas and current president of the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. I know he'll be excited to hear about the Ag Food Policy Center's work in that arena as well. So thanks again, Bart, for joining us here and kind of spending some time and kind of give it some insight and kind of what to look forward to on the horizon of the policy. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure, Chad. Thank you for having me, and congrats on your new role there as well. I've always enjoyed working with you over the years, regardless of what hat you were wearing, and but excited to see you there with Talt now, and look forward to working with you guys going forward. Yeah,
same here on this end, Bart. And I look forward to keep working with you, and it's great. We're both in Texas now, and looking forward to keep furthering working together and making a difference, making an impact for producers. So again, appreciate it. Hope everybody can join us on our next episode, where we're going to sit down with one of our founding members, Texas Farm Bureau, with Mr. Cy Cook, the executive director. Cy has over 30 years with Texas Farm Bureau. He started out as the county Farm Bureau board member and county president, and then later kind of started serving as a field representative for 20 counties in the South Central Texas before, kind of moving into kind of the home headquarter office in Waco and taking some senior management responsibilities. And in 2016, moved into the executive director role. So looking forward to sitting down with Cy and kind of, hearing, what's on the horizon with Texas Farm Bureau, and also kind of visit about, their relationship with Talt and what it means for both organizations. So hope everybody can join us on that next episode with that. So hope everybody has a blessed day, and we'll listen to you again Beyond the Fence Line.
Beyond the Fence Line is brought to you by the Texas Agricultural Land Trust, dedicated to conserving the Texas heritage of agricultural lands, wildlife habitats, and natural resources. Find out more at txaglandtrust.org.